Hey, everybody, welcome to the Go Wellness Practice Accelerator Challenge. I'm Reagan Archibald, and today we're going to be talking about some very interesting things. Maybe you'll find it interesting, maybe you won't. That's going to be, choice is going to be yours. But today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the HPA axis, how to approach it in your practice, what to do about it. We're going to be covering some of the new protocols with the Accelerate Wellness programs. And so when it comes to the HPA axis, I'm going to share with you just some insights that will help you understand the importance of it. But really what this is it's the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. And as you look at this axis, man, it's an axis that's so important because what it does is it regulates epinephrine and norepinephrine and also cortisol. And so many of you have asked, like, well, why in phase one of care, why do you directly treat the HPA axis before anything? Why don't you go and take them through a gut protocol and do all the removal phases? Or why don't you focus on getting their thyroid fixed up front? Why are we doing HPA axis right out of the gates? And so really, if you think about it, the fundamental reason is because nothing in the body will work if you don't correct the HPA axis. And so we're going to talk about 4 ways to fix it. We're going to talk about the hormones that it releases. So grab your pen and paper, notepads, and let's dive in. And then feel free to ask questions on this. But first of all, for those of you that are with us today, we've got a few of you on, and we appreciate it. And this one's for you, RJ. So this was a question that came up. So the very first thing on the HPA axis is, if you look at the image, and I'm going to share with you, let me see if I can share my screen. So I'll give you guys a visual of it. Okay, so you guys should be able to see the screen there, but really what the HPA axis is, just at its root is it's the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenals. And once again, if you've got a person, so imagine trying to get somebody to relax when they're just chronically stressed. How many of you are probably not the most intelligent when your spouse or your significant other is stressed, and you're like, hey, just relax? How many of you have told someone to relax when they're stressed? It just doesn't end well, is what I've discovered. And so the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, the reason why we started addressing this full speed ahead is because as I started talking to some of the leading researchers in peptides and regenerative and functional medicine, what they said is the majority of humans right now, based on the previous 2 years of living, the majority of humans are in a post-traumatic stress disorder state. And I know many of you are going through your own kind of crisis, and you're going through your own transformation. And that is all over the place as far as the levels of it. I have a lot of patients who have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And what I see with them is I see that there's this really this disconnect between their body's ability to heal and our ability to help them, unless you dismantle that threat to the HPA axis, because it's one of the most important things. So one of the hormones that happens in the brain is your corticotropin releasing hormone, that's CRH. And this can also be your corticotropin releasing factors, but it's a hormone that's produced by the hypothalamus in response to stress. And then remember, the hypothalamus is like the executor, and the pituitary is like the manager that orchestrates all things. And so then the pituitary gland secretes the adrenocorticotropic hormone, and that's in response to, if you eat crappy food, the artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, they spike that release. It can be from certain lifestyles. If you are constantly on the go, if you're eating on the run or not eating, you can dismantle this HPA axis. if you're not getting to sleep on time, if you're overworking yourself or overstimulation, this all causes that release of the corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and then your pituitary and your adrenals just go to work. The second hormone is the adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now, this one's really important because it's tied to your prostaglandins, and so the prostaglandins are what can cause a spike in blood pressure, and this is a big issue with insulin resistance as well. But the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, is better for those of us who struggle with the English language, like Reagan. ACTH is released by your pituitary gland, and then that goes down to activate your kidneys to stimulate the adrenal glands to release and increase the production of glucocorticoids. And so this is when you can have that spike in blood pressure, the heart rate starts getting elevated. And remember, our bodies are a hydraulic system. And so when you have this ACTH release from the pituitary glands, you're going to see a person manifest as full-blown stress, which is not fun. And so hopefully you guys are saying, like, okay, so at the end of the day, Reagan, just tell us we're getting the body out of stress. Well, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're removing that one of the big threats to healing, which is cortisol destabilization or dysregulation. The third hormone that's important is the glucocorticoids. So what are those? That's the steroids that regulate the metabolic rate. And once I already mentioned that this glucocorticoids, this is cortisol. This is, at the end of the day, that's that stress response in it. It responds to inflammation, and it responds to immune stress. So when you hear us talk about the fact that the adrenal glands regulate the white blood cells, they do in fact regulate the white blood cells, because if you've got cortisol that's present, well, cortisol is one of the only anti-inflammatory hormones in your body. And that's why it's high in the morning, because it's cleaning up the mess from the growth hormone that got released whilst sleeping. And so your body's going through this beautiful recovery process. And in the morning, it gets swept away by cortisol. But when cortisol becomes dysregulated because of that adrenal response from the brain, and because of the corticotropin releasing hormone, then what happens is you have elevated levels of cortisol all day, and then your body can never go into this recovery phase. And you don't have, as far as your sirtuin pathways, NAD gets plugged up. You have inability to regulate the mTOR pathway, because cortisol, what it does, and that's the fourth hormone in the body in this axis, cortisol is really what's important to help us respond to injuries, lack of sleep, excessive exercise, anxiety, depression. And so it's your fight or flight response. And many of you have heard of this. And so it's really interesting if you kind of look at what this is. I'll share an image with you here. So yeah, when you're dealing with pressure, one of the big things you want to look at is, can your patients actually, do they have the capability of, actually handling stress, and how well do they handle that stress? Because this is the response that we're looking for, is how well are they getting the negative feedback from the hypothalamus to the pituitary to the adrenals? And that's the big issue there. And if this cycle is dysregulated at any one of the areas, cortisol is that alpha hormone in the body. So when cortisol is not happy, ain't nobody happy until cortisol goes back to bed. It's just like insulin. When insulin is dysregulated, and when it's, either you've got insulin resistance, or the pancreas is producing too much insulin, or the blood sugar is not stable, then really the big issue is, the body's not going to heal. And so, if you look at the phase 1 in the Accelerate Wellness program, it's all built around getting the HPA axis corrected, getting insulin resistance stable, because cortisol is the big contributor. If someone's not eating sugar, and they've got on the right lifestyle. Maybe you put them on the paleo diet or the bulletproof or some kind of keto diet, or high protein is a new favorite. The macros is what I love these days. But if those things aren't working, it's not because they're eating sugar. And then you guys are, looking at their hemoglobin A1C or their fasting glucose, and it's easy to dismiss the patient as, just like anyone else, and they want to save face. They don't want to disappoint you. So they lie about what they're actually eating. But in all reality, it's called gluconeogenesis. When cortisol is not stable in the body, the liver, as a byproduct of this dysregulation, the liver will spit out glucose, and to try to stabilize the blood sugar, because when you're in fight or flight, what your body's doing is it's saying, we need help. And so then your liver rushes to the rescue, because the liver is like, in Chinese medicine, it's the general of the army. And so the liver rushes in and makes all this glucose. But most of us are sitting at a traffic light in our car, and we got road rage, and we're getting this HPA axis dysregulation, or we're stressed out because we're at work, but we're not really doing a lot. We're not doing the things that we need to from the internal perspective to calm down that stress response. So these are all really important things that we want to look at when it comes to the HPA axis. So for the big things that we look at, if you just look at your reset, and I'll share with you guys this 60-day reset is all built around just getting your body back in alignment, and your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals. And this is perfect because I promised you guys at the last Go Wellness session I'd go through this in greater detail. All right, so the 60-day reset, if you think about these lifestyle habits, okay, so one of the things that's going to dysregulate the HPA axis is poor sleep. And so if you don't believe me, well, let's just Google this and say, can you go longer without food or without sleep? Okay, do you know the answer to that one? What can you go longer without? Food or sleep? Yeah, do you know why?
Because your body's got to have time to recover.
Yeah, it's your brain more than your body even.
Yeah,
because you'll have seizures, and because your body's got all these reserves built in where we can go, like, I think like both Buddha and Jesus went 40 days with no food, no water, and then there's been people who have been put in deprivation tanks, and they can go 60 days with, as long as they stay hydrated, they do pretty darn well, and their liver will shrink in half. But I'm just, I don't want any of you to go try that right out of the gates. But,
yeah, not recommended.
Yeah, I mean, fasting's great, but it's just proof that our bodies, they're pretty darn resilient. But if you look at the person who went the longest without any sleep, and even you think of those experiments, there's some creepy, like Russian experiments where they put these prisoners of war on like methamphetamines and kept them awake. I don't know if you've seen those images, Cade, but no. I mean, they look deadly. I mean, it's just scary to see when people go without sleep. The brain just starts short circuiting, and your brain has the lymphatics in it needs to be refreshed. And so the brain is, and the connection to the body is the literal HPA axis. That is that vagus nerve, that vagal tone, the heart rate variability. And so the very first, reset we have for our patients in the HPA axis is get them sleeping. So if you get to bed by 9:30, you wake up at 5:30, it follows that circadian rhythm. And yes, it's a pain in the ass when we got daylight savings time in most states, because you get a little disruption in the HPA axis. It takes about a week to recover from it. Hey everybody, Reagan Archibald here. I hope you enjoyed the Go Wellness show and maybe learned a couple things you could apply to your practice. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur who wants to work in an academic think tank with like-minded humans who are just like you, looking to provide better service, better quality of care for your patients, reach us at info@gowellness.com, and we're happy to do a free practice analysis for you.